The warehouse smells of olive oil and unwashed bodies. The year is approximately 146 BCE, 3 weeks after the fall of Corinth. The woman standing in the processing chamber was, until 23 days ago, the wife of a Greek aristocrat whose family had governed this city for 6 generations. Her name is Cleomach. She is 31 years old. She speaks 4 languages, can quote Homer from memory, has managed a household of 40 servants, negotiated trade agreements on her husband's behalf, and raised 3 children, who are now somewhere in this same warehouse complex, separated from her during the initial sorting that followed the city's capture. She does not know where her children are. She has not seen them since the 2nd day after the walls fell. She does not know if they are alive. What she knows is that she is standing in a room with 11 other women, all of them from families that once commanded respect throughout the Greek world. All of them now property of a Roman slave dealer named Gaius Varius Flaccus. All of them being prepared for an auction that will take place in 3 days in what was once their city. She can feel the cold stone floor beneath her bare feet, can feel the eyes of the dealer's assistants as they move among the women with measuring ropes and wax tablets, documenting information that Roman buyers will want to know. She can see the implements arranged on the wooden table against the far wall, shears and grooming tools, cosmetic pots containing substances she does not recognize, chains and collars in various sizes waiting to be fitted. The man who owns her now, the dealer Varius Flaccus, enters the room and surveys his merchandise with the professional eye of someone who has processed thousands of human beings through facilities exactly like this one. He has been in the slave trade for 27 years. He has purchased captives from a dozen conquered peoples. He knows exactly what Roman buyers want, exactly how to prepare merchandise to maximize sale prices. He looks at Cleomach with an appraising gaze that makes her feel less than the furniture in her former home. This one, he says to his chief assistant, gesturing toward her, she still has her pride. I can see it in how she stands. 3 days is enough time to address that. Begin with the standard protocol. What happens to Cleomach over the next 3 days, and what happened to tens of thousands of women like her across centuries of Roman conquest, is what tonight's video will reveal. This is not the Rome of marble temples and philosophical debates. This is the reality of the slave markets, where human beings were processed like commodities, where captured noble women were systematically prepared for sale, where techniques refined over generations transformed the proudest women of conquered nations into merchandise that Roman buyers would find acceptable. This is what the slave dealers did. This is what the historical sources document. This is what you were never taught. What you are about to learn has been sanitized out of most educational accounts of Roman civilization, because the reality contradicts the idealized image of Rome as a foundation of Western culture and values. You know about Roman slavery in the abstract. You've heard that Romans kept slaves, that slavery was common in the ancient world, that the economy depended on enslaved labor. You may have encountered the more dramatic aspects in popular culture. Gladiators fighting in arenas, slaves rowing in galleys, the famous rebellion of Spartacus. But you have never learned what actually happened to the people who became Roman slaves. You have never heard about the processing facilities where captured populations were sorted, evaluated, and prepared for sale. You have never encountered the detailed accounts that Roman writers left of how slave dealers operated, how they selected and processed their merchandise, how they transformed free people into commodities through systematic techniques designed to break resistance and create compliance. Tonight, you will discover what the Roman sources themselves reveal about the slave trade that enriched Rome for centuries. You will learn about the mangones, the professional slave dealers who purchased captives from military commanders and processed them for retail sale. You will learn about the specific techniques these dealers used to prepare noble women for auction, techniques documented in Roman legal texts, mentioned in Roman literature, described in sources that scholars have known about for centuries, but that popular education continues to ignore. You will learn about Cleomach of Corinth, who was 31 years old when her city fell, and who spent 3 days in processing before being sold to a household in Rome. about Bona of Carthage, who was the daughter of a senator in that city and who was separated from her children during the destruction that followed the Third Punic War, about Theodora of Macedon, who was a priestess before her capture and who was specifically targeted for preparation techniques designed to destroy her religious identity, about a Senora of Pontus, who attempted to resist the processing and discovered what the dealers did to women who did not cooperate. You will learn these things from Roman sources, from legal texts that regulated the slave trade, from literary works that described it, from archaeological evidence that confirms it. The Romans documented what they did because they did not consider it shameful. They wrote about slave processing the way they wrote about agriculture or manufacturing, as a business practice with established methods and professional standards. Subscribe if you want to understand what Roman civilization actually looked like for the millions of people who were processed through its slave markets. Comment below telling me where in the world you're watching from, because Cleomachus is standing in that processing facility in Corinth, and Varius Flaccus has just ordered his assistants to begin the standard protocol. And I am going to tell you exactly what that protocol involved, what the dealers did, what the women experienced, and what the evidence reveals about practices that transformed free people into property. But first, I need to explain how these women came to be in the dealers' hands at all. Roman military conquest followed patterns that remained consistent across centuries of expansion. When a city fell, whether through assault, siege, or surrender under unfavorable terms, the population became property of the Roman state, to be disposed of according to the commander's judgment and the Senate's instructions. The disposition typically followed a predictable sequence. Military-age men were often executed or enslaved for labor-intensive work in mines, quarries, and agricultural operations. Children were separated from parents and processed as a distinct category of merchandise, and women, particularly women of noble or wealthy families, were identified, sorted, and transferred to professional slave dealers who specialized in preparing high-value human merchandise for sale. The identification of noble women happened quickly, usually within hours of a city's fall. Roman officers had standing instructions to secure valuable captives before the general looting could disperse or damage them. Soldiers who captured noble women could expect bounties that exceeded what ordinary captives would bring, creating incentive for rapid identification and protection of high-value merchandise. The criteria for identification were straightforward. Clothing and jewelry indicated wealth. Soft hands and unmarked skin indicated freedom from manual labor. Bearing and speech patterns indicated education. Household staff who could be interrogated indicated social position. Within hours of capture, Roman officers could sort a city's female population into categories corresponding to expected sale prices. Cleomachus was identified during the sack of Corinth by her clothing, fine wool dyed with expensive Tyrian purple, and by the gold jewelry she was wearing when soldiers broke into her home. She was seized along with her 3 children and approximately 40 servants, all of whom were held together initially before being sorted by category and transferred to different dealers based on their expected market value. The dealer Gaius Varius Flaccus purchased Cleomachus and 11 other noble women from the military authorities approximately 6 days after Corinth's fall. The purchase price is not recorded, but similar transactions from this period suggest he paid between 2,000 and 5,000 denarii per woman, a substantial investment that he expected to recover several times over through careful preparation and skilled marketing. The women were transported from the military holding facility to Varius Flaccus's processing warehouse in a covered cart that prevented them from seeing where they were going and prevented anyone outside from seeing them. This concealment was standard practice. Dealers protected their merchandise from environmental damage, sun rain, from the eyes of competitors who might try to assess the quality of new stock, and from the psychological impact of witnessing the destruction of their former cities. By the time Cleomachus arrived at the processing facility, she had not seen sunlight for approximately 14 hours. She had not eaten for approximately 20 hours. She had not seen her children for approximately 72 hours. And she had no idea what was about to happen to her. Roman slave dealers operated facilities that combined the functions of warehouse, workshop, and preparation center. The archaeological evidence from sites like Delos, the major slave trading center of the late Republic, reveals complexes containing holding cells, bathing facilities, examination rooms, and display areas arranged in sequences that suggest systematic processing of human merchandise. The facility where Cleomac was processed was typical of its kind. The holding area consisted of cells approximately 8 feet by 8 feet, each designed to contain 2 to 4 captives depending on their category and value. High-value noblewomen were typically held in smaller groups to minimize conflict and injury that might reduce their market price. The bathing facilities included both cold and heated pools, with adjacent rooms for grooming and cosmetic treatment. These facilities were not luxury accommodations. They were processing stations where human beings were cleaned, groomed, and prepared according to standardized procedures designed to present merchandise in optimal condition. The examination rooms were equipped for thorough physical assessment. Measuring instruments documented height, weight, and proportions. Medical implements allowed dealers to assess health conditions. Light sources were positioned to reveal skin conditions, scars, or other features that might affect value. The display areas were designed to present merchandise to potential buyers. Platforms allowed inspection from all angles. Chains and restraints positioned bodies in standard poses that buyers expected. Lighting was arranged to highlight favorable features and minimize unfavorable ones. Various Flaccus's facility in Corinth was a temporary installation. The conquest had created a sudden surplus of high-value captives that exceeded the capacity of permanent facilities in the region. But even this temporary facility followed the established patterns, because the techniques that worked in permanent markets worked equally well in conquest situations. Cleomachi entered this facility on the 14th day after her capture. She would remain in processing for 3 days before being moved to the display area for auction. What happened during those 3 days followed protocols that various Flaccus had refined across 27 years in the trade. The first stage of processing was assessment, a thorough evaluation of each captive's physical condition, psychological state, and market potential. This assessment determined which preparation techniques would be applied and how the merchandise would be positioned for sale. For Cleomachi, the assessment began within hours of her arrival at the facility. She was brought to an examination room where she was required to remove her clothing. In her case, a simple tunic that had replaced her finer garments during transport. The requirement to stand before strangers, male assistants who showed no reaction to her presence except professional evaluation, was itself part of the assessment, revealing how captives responded to the loss of privacy that their former status had protected. The physical examination that followed was comprehensive. Her height was measured and recorded. Her weight was estimated by experienced handlers. Her proportions were documented, the measurements that Roman buyers used to evaluate merchandise. Her skin was examined for scars, birthmarks, blemishes, or signs of disease. Her hair was evaluated for thickness, length, and condition. Her teeth were inspected for decay or damage. Her hands were examined for calluses or other evidence of manual labor. Their softness confirmed her status as a noble woman who had never worked with her hands. The examination then became more invasive. Medical procedures assessed her health and physical history in ways that the Roman legal texts describe as standard practice for high-value merchandise. A dealer who sold a person without disclosing relevant physical conditions could face legal liability, so thorough examination was both good business practice and legal protection. The Roman jurist Ulpian, writing approximately 3 centuries after Cleomachi's time, describes the information dealers were legally required to disclose. The seller must declare if the slave is diseased, defective, a runaway, or liable to punishment. The same applies to female slaves. If she has physical conditions affecting her capacity for service, the buyer must be informed. The clinical language of legal texts like this conceals the human experience of being examined like livestock by strangers who cared only about your market value. Cleomachi stood through this examination in silence, her face showing nothing of what she felt, her body responding to the handler's directions with the minimum compliance necessary to avoid being forced. The psychological assessment happened simultaneously with the physical examination. How did the captive respond to commands? Did she comply immediately or hesitate? Did she show fear, anger, resignation, or resistance? Had she already accepted that her body was no longer her own to protect? The assessment notes for Cleomachie, as reconstructed from similar documented cases, would have read something like, female, approximately 30 years, Greek, formerly of noble status, physical condition, excellent, no visible defects, good proportions, evidence of previous childbirth, psychological condition, resistant but controlled, shows pride in bearing, likely to require intensive preparation before market presentation. The phrase likely to require intensive preparation was significant. It determined which protocols would be applied over the following days. Thank you for watching.